Hey there, in this video we're going to take a quick look at the other kinds of objects variables can be attached to. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about the features of these objects because we'll do that in a later video for a later lecture. I just want to show you that they can be variables. Let's start with strings. We've seen these a few times already. Let's say we have a variable I'm going to call name, and in the name we're going to put a name. We'll use my name. So now variable name contains the string Dave. We can include some special characters in that string. For example, let's say I want to include a new line. So I want to have a string that has line breaks in it. Is using a special slash in here. Slash means the next thing I type is going to be special. There's a few special characters. The most commonly used of this is n for new line. Slash n means it's kind of like hitting enter. Move the cursor on to the next line before continuing. So if we do like Dave is cool and save that as the variable name. Now if I print name, we'll see it prints it with the new line. If I just look at what's in the variable name, I'm going to see the slash n literally there because that is literally encoded in the string. But when printed, it will print with the new line. Another thing you might want to use the slash for is including quotation marks. Let's say we want to write out a book title. A little awkward to type because it's trying to add extra quote marks in there. Okay, let's say we have a book called The End in quotation marks. Trying to run this is going to lead to an error because the way Python will interpret it is it's going to think that the quotes around my book title are being used to demark a string. So it's going to say book equals empty string, and then right next to it is the word the. It's going to think the is a variable name, but that variable is not assigned, and it's going to just crash. So there's two options here. First of all, your simplest option is to change what string or what quotation type you use for the string. In Python, you can use single quotes or double quotes to demark your string. It doesn't really matter which you use. So if I want to mix quotation marks, I can use singles and then singles to mark the string, and then I can have double quotes in the string itself. That'll work just fine. In fact, let's print it just to make sure. The other option, though, is to use the slash to say that, hey, I specifically want you to include the quotation mark character. So I'll put a backslash before each of these. And then I can use double quotes all the way around if I'm feeling really stubborn. Or if I have a more complicated example, like if I had like a contraction in there, in addition to having the book title, then I have to do this for some kind of string. For some kind of quotation mark. Sometimes you want the slash to literally be a slash, like if you're writing out the path to some kind of file name. In that case, you can do a double slash. So like if I want some variable called path to be like c:/home, and you have to have two slashes, otherwise, well, home might be okay. I don't think there is a command that's /h. Yeah, so in this case, it said, well, there's no command that's /h, printed it just fine. But let's say we had c:/new. That's not going to print very well because it's going to think that you meant new line when you type /n. You've got two solutions here. You can do a double slash. // means I want a literal slash, and that'll work for you. Or you can leave it alone and stick an R right in front of that quotation mark. It has to be immediately in front of the quotation mark right here. And that means make a raw string. It means don't do any kind of fancy character substitution. Just give me literally what's in the string. So especially if you're on Windows and you're typing out paths, be careful about this. This is your easy solution to that. So there's a couple, well, more than a couple, 3 other objects we want to look at here in Python that we can attach variables to. And those are lists, tuples, and dictionaries. We'll talk a lot more about their properties in upcoming lectures, but for now I just want to introduce their existence. So if we start with a list, we can represent a list with square brackets. So I'll say I want to list a bunch of values. So lists are a way to pass around a bunch of values all together. Instead of having to come up with a variable name for each of these objects, I can put them all together in a single variable called a list. And then there's a way called indexing or slicing to get to specific values out of the list. And we'll learn about that later on. Close cousin of that is the tuple. The tuple Looks a lot like a list, except you use parentheses instead of square brackets. The difference is behind the scenes. They're treated a bit differently. In a list, you're allowed to change the contents of the list in place, whereas in a tuple, you're not allowed to do that. That's a feature called mutability. Lists are considered to be mutable. You can change them in place, whereas tuples and strings, as it so happens, are immutable. You can't change them in place. You can make new ones based on old ones, but you can't change them in place. This makes them a little bit more efficient behind the scenes. And there's a good number of features in Python that are secretly tuples. We'll learn about how to assign multiple values on a single line, how to return multiple values from a function. Those are all based on tuples. So we'll use tuples a lot. Lists, on the other hand, we'll use for some things, but we have a better option called an array that we can get out of a package named NumPy, and we'll learn about that in, I guess, a couple weeks from now. And the last collection type object I want to talk about is a dictionary, or a dict in Python. So the dictionary uses curly brackets, and instead of just putting things in order, it gives them names. You can use whatever unique object you want for the name. So they can be strings, or they can be even integers or floating point numbers. But we could do, say, first is equal to, I don't know, we could do 1, comma, second is 2, comma, I mean, they don't even have to be words like first, second. It could be like home equal to yes. Now, with dictionaries, it is actually not that unusual to have all kinds of weird stuff packed into your dictionary. Not weird stuff, but it might be things like, if you're doing some kind of business program, it would be like employee's first name, employee's last name, employee's salary, blah, blah, blah. We won't use them very much for physics type programming. We will much more frequently use lists and tuples. But there's a few places where dictionaries pop up. They can be handy to pass values into functions. So like we could have a dictionary that says, oh, the value of x is going to be 1.2 and the value of y is going to be 3.4. You know, there's places they'll be used. So they're not going to be an unused feature. They're just not used as much as tuples followed by lists. Last thing I want to look at here is adding and multiplying these objects. So you might think addition and multiplication only makes sense for numbers, but if you think about it, you should be able to stick strings together. That's addition, isn't it? So if I have the string hello, and I want to add that to the string world, well, the way Python will interpret that is I want to concatenate, or I want to stick these two strings together. We can do this with lists as well. So if I want to stick two lists together, this is kind of handy. Like if I want to stick 1, 2 onto 3, 4, I can use addition. Same thing with tuples. Except well, it'll work with your tuples. I was talking about them being immutable, but what actually happens here is this just gives you a brand new tuple. It doesn't do anything to the originals. The originals are untouched. It just makes a brand new one for you that happens to include the values from the others. Multiplication is used for repeating. So if I want to do hello 3 times, I just multiply it by 3. Or if I want to repeat my list 3 times, just multiply it by 3. As far as multiplying strings, one place I found this really handy is if you're printing output and you want to do a bunch of hash marks to separate it. You know, instead of typing out 50 hash marks, you could just do a single hash mark, multiply it by 50. It'll print out all 50 for you. Multiplying lists, you know, if you want a whole bunch of zeros or something, you could just have a list with a single 0 in it and multiply it by 50. Now you have a list with 50 zeros in it. So these can be time savers. They're not a feature you have to use, but it's one that can save you from some typing. Okay, so we're going to stop there. We've looked at a few other variable types, introduced them at least, strings, lists, tuples, and dictionaries, with our eye on the future, in particular with the lists and the tuples that we'll be using them coming up.